Hi, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. We are live on Al Jazeera and YouTube. Something that often gets lost in reporting of Syria's war, the experiences of everyday people who find themselves caught up in it. Today, we hear some of their stories. In 2011, Marwan Hisham and his close friends Nael and Tareq joined the first protests of the Arab Spring in Syria. They marched through the streets shouting anti-government slogans, running from soldiers and tear gas. 5 years later, one was a rebel, one had been killed by government forces, and one, Marwan, was a journalist. Marwan began working with American artist and journalist Molly Crabapple. That was back in 2015 when she drew illustrations of secret photos he took in his hometown of Raqqa while it was under the control of ISIL. The success of that project and the rapport they developed were the seed for Brothers of the Gun, an intimate memoir of life in Syria that Marwan and Molly worked on together. So, they join us today. Marwan Hisham is in Ankara, Turkey, and Molly Crabapple is with us from New York. Hello, Molly. Hello, Marwan. It seems appropriate that we connect via the internet because that's how you two connected. I'm sure you've got two slightly different stories. Marwan, how did you meet Molly?
So we met through Twitter. We started following each other in early 2014, and then Molly asked me to contribute to quote me for an article she was writing about jihadist activity on social media, and from then we started to communicate regularly until we decided to work together.
Remarkable Twitter relationship. Molly, let me show people a couple of the early tweets that probably caught your eye. This one here is from Marwan from 2014. ISIS suspends education in Raqqa, prohibits students living in its territories from going to schools. So that one was from December of 2014. Another one of these early tweets. A translation from Marwan. We do not serve unveiled women. #Raqqa. What were the tweets that caught your eye, Molly, that made you think, I need to work with this guy?
Well, originally there was a small group of people, analysts, journalists, some Syrians, some people outside who would talk about Syria, but there was only one guy who had Raqqa as his location in his Twitter bio.
Yeah.
And at that time, Raqqa was under ISIS occupation, and I almost couldn't believe it. I was like, how can this guy be tweeting from, under ISIS? I mean, ISIS murders journalists. And so I got to know him, and I realized that indeed he was tweeting from under them, and he was just a human of lunatic bravery. And so I started quoting him. He started just giving me information about stuff like ISIS banning the World Cup at cafes. Also, we started to become friends because I was learning Arabic, and Marwan had an amazing Arabic literary education that he was happy to teach me a lot of. And after a while, one day I asked him, I was like, Marwan, do you have any cell phone photos on your phone of just daily life, the sort of things that, we all have of our hometowns? And he said, well, I don't, but I could take some.
So, Marwan, explain what it took to take some pictures in Aleppo and in Raqqa as well.
And Musa. So there's difference between taking pictures from under ISIS and pictures from rebel-controlled territories. You might get in trouble. I mean, they might arrest you, detain you, the rebels, but it's never that serious. ISIS look at you immediately as a spy working for foreign intelligence. And then you're gonna definitely be executed.
There was one time where you were asked for your phone and you had a whole load of contacts on your phone. Can you tell us that story? Because that was a very scary moment for you.
Yeah, so it was a bit funny. I had to make a backup plan, and it was to put some jihad in a sheet in your phone because there's no coverage, no mobile coverage outside, so there's no justification for you to take out your phone unless you're doing something offline. And I sat aside eating my sandwich and taking picture of this police
Okay.
officer, and he noticed I was suspicious and came to me. So I started to play this nasheed, and when he heard it, he was like, "Okay."
Yeah.
So
he
turned
thought
around.
he thought not only were you eating your sandwich, but also being very super religious and very observant. Molly, did you have any idea the danger that you were asking Marwan to put himself in?
So this guy, he kind of lied to me about that. I asked him, I was like, you're not going to take any risks, right, to take photos? Yeah. And he's like, oh, no, it's my hometown. I would never do that. And then I think the first thing that crystallized to me the really mad daring that he had was he snuck into an ISIS hospital and he sent me photos. And I was like, what are you doing, man? And he's like, oh, don't worry, there are no cameras. And I point out, I'm like, right in your photo, there's a CCTV camera. But fortunately, it was not working. And I mean, after that, I did know the risk of it, but ultimately, it wasn't me asking him to take those risks so much as Marwan deciding to take those risks, because he had determined that life inside Raqqa was just dangerous, and he was willing to take on additional danger to be a journalist.
There's something I want to share with everybody here. Marwan, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's very important that, risk is part of everyday life.
Yeah.
In such situation. So what you're facing today, you could be arrested, you could be killed from bombing, anything could happen to you, basically. So something like that, except for, specific moments, it's, I mean, it will sound unusual to say, but it didn't sound so crazy to me or so risky at that time, because simply, I was facing similar situations every day, and this what encouraged me.
What's really interesting about the front cover of the book, other than this striking illustration, is that the memoir is by both of you. It's not illustrated by Molly and written by Marwan. It actually says Marwan and Molly. Molly, I want to take us through a couple of your illustrations. There's one that you particularly picked here that I've got on my laptop, which is one of the early protests in Raqqa. Why did you want us to see that particular image?
So many people have tried to write out the origins of the Syrian revolution. They've tried to reduce the entire revolution and the war to geopolitics, to a matter of a fight between Assad and ISIS, or a fight between Russia and Iran on one hand, and Saudi and Qatar in the US on another. And they forget that this actually started as a popular uprising. So I was very, very concerned with documenting those moments of early protest. This drawing, it's the first protest that the security forces and the army shot live ammunition at the protesters. And to get an image like this, what I did was I poured over citizen video. And this citizen video, it's blurry. You can barely tell what's going on in it. It's taken by people on their phones, holding them vertically, running away from tear gas and running away from bullets. So what I would do is I would freeze frame it over and over and over. I'd take maybe like 100 freeze frames. I would print them out. I would lay them out. And then I would draw them all together so that I could create like a panorama, so that I could restore what it might have felt like to stand there, what it might have felt like to see these protests through Marwan's eyes.
Marwan, I want to share this thought with you. It comes from our online community, and it's an interesting take here. H.G. Flores says that something like a memoir is inherently biased because a memoir is so personal. It will be shaped by the beliefs and opinions of the author. Although it can be a powerful recounting of how events shape a person, it must be remembered that it is a one-sided account of the events that took place.
I agree that, of course, it's a memoir, so it's not supposed to be to give a comprehensive picture of what's happening. It's about my life at that specific time and specific places. So, of course, there is no book that can cover everything that happened in the country for more than 7 years now. But it comes after all to the person's integrity and what he what he witnessed and what he or she thought more important. But for me, I wanted to be as neutral as possible, to even distance my feelings from myself, as much as I could. But when it comes to my opinions, I put them down over there. But when I talked about my friends, I try to be more like journalist than a friend. And also what I witnessed, the places I went to, people I met. I tried also to give a very accurate picture of people, life, etc. And when are things that are about myself and my emotions, I put them there and said, these are my opinions.
Sure. Let's give people a little example. There's a young man called Abu Mujahid who you met in Raqqa. His dad was a member of ISIL. His dad was very strict, needless to say. And there's a little paragraph that you can share with us. Give us a sense of what you thought about this young man. What was he doing?
So this man was born to an ISIS fighter before ISIS was named the Islamic groups of Iraq and Sham.
Yeah.
When it was still Al-Qaeda. When he grew up there, and when ISIS crossed the border and came to Syria, they started to relocate fighters from different areas from Iraq to Syria, back and forth. And his father, with the whole family, was sent in a mission to Raqqa, and I met this very young guy who sounded very interesting to me, because with time I discovered that he's the typical
He's just a kid. He's just a kid, and he likes playing video games, but his dad happens to be a fighter in ISIL. Read us the little paragraph, Marwan. Go ahead.
Yeah, so to this day, I wonder what Abu Mujahid might have been in another world. He was too timid to be a bully. He didn't strut around like a Tunisian fighter, high on other people's fear. He wasn't some ball of social awkwardness from Antwerp, nor desperate for recognition like my nephew, who found in the Kalashnikov an intimate to wriggle him out from beneath the social imprisonment inflicted by his family's older man. Abu Mujahid was simply the son of a father who happened to be an avid jihadist. He was small, calm, nice, innocent. Yes, innocent. It was the innocence that struck into me like a bar.
And I think that there's something so important about the Abu Mujahid chapter, because when you're dealing with a group that's not only as evil as ISIS, but that is as showy about its evil as ISIS is, that doesn't try to conceal it, there's a tendency for people to say these aren't humans, these are monsters with green skin and tails and horns, and that's something very comforting for people, because if you say that ISIS is apart from humanity, you don't have to acknowledge the potential for evil that lurks in people. And I think that what we were trying to do with the Abu Mujahid chapter is to say, like, no, these are people. These are humans. They're humans that often chose to do incomprehensible evil, but they're humans and they're not apart from the species.
Abu Mujahid, the kid, when he came and at first chance to show the real he, not the one who ISIS basically erased this whole phase in his life, which is teenage life, and he jumped from a kid to a man. And with time, when he kept coming, and first time he saw us smoking and then playing games and all of these things, immediately he wanted this escape. And
so Marwan, you basically corrupted this young man into being a normal teen boy, smoking and playing video games, but secretly. There is something that Molly and Marwan, which is remarkable from the way that you two worked. You couldn't be in two more different worlds, but somehow, Molly, you tapped into the world that Marwan was experiencing. For instance, there's a sequence in the book where some women come into the cafe that Marwan is running. He's running an internet cafe. He's very resourceful in Raqqa. And there's this woman that you drew, but also these women. And these women stuck out at me. Can you tell me their story? Their story that you put into that illustration?
The first woman is a woman she's a female ISIS member whose job it was. She reminds me of the ants in The Handmaid's Tale. It was her job to guard other women, including enslaved Yazidi women. And the pair of the other two women, the women whose faces aren't covered, those are Yazidi women who have been kidnapped from Sinjar, a mother and her daughter and then her infant baby. And these women have been brought into Marwan's cafe. These are women who would soon be sold to fighters and raped and go through unimaginable horrors, women who had seen trauma, the likes of which no human is meant to comprehend, who'd probably seen their male family members murdered. And when I drew this image, Marwan obviously wasn't sitting around taking pictures of these women. So we relied entirely on his memories. And Marwan was so strict with this. He was like, this is not going to be cliche. I don't want something that is degrading to these women's dignity. I don't want something that looks like, some Madonna and Child Hallmark thing. And I don't want something lurid. I want something that's true. And to do this, I drew them again and again and again. And he would look at them and he'd say, no, make her older, make her younger, make her hands careless. And I would just draw and draw and draw. And this one I'm so proud of, because I think that despite having no reference of what these women looked like, I created something that was close to truth.
Marwan, I want to show our audience some pictures of Molly at work. We have her working ferociously away. And I'm going to show you these pictures because you two worked in a really interesting way. You helped each other with the visuals. You helped each other with the way the memoir was written. It reads like a novel. Who was the pusher? Who was the bossiest, Marwan?
I think I took the liberty to a bit dictate. Only to stick to my memory. I provided references when I could, but when there are no references, I had to make sure that the drawing step by step stays very true to my memory. So Molly would have to. At every stage send it to me and be like, did I make this object here same size? Is it located in the right place? Is it right to this is how you meant it, or etc. And especially the challenges. I'm not I have very small idea about art, but I can see how difficult to convey, especially facial expressions, so hard. And this basically took us, that's why the drawing about these Yazidi women took us a long time to complete, because of these complexities, and there's certain feeling that is not easy to convey, but also you need to give the exact expression and all that.
And it was something very similar to with how we wrote. So ultimately, of course, it was Marwan's life. Marwan had the final say on everything. But I think that all writers are egomaniacs, and that's probably why most writers don't co-write something like this. To do this book, it started with notes that Marwan had taken surreptitiously on his phone when he was living under ISIS. Notes that he had to email to himself just in case his phone was checked and ISIS would see it. When he came to Turkey, he showed me these notes, and then we laid them all out. We saw what needed to be filled out. And then I would just sit next to him and I would interview him and I would interrogate him. I would say, what was it like to go through that checkpoint? What was the guy wearing? How high was the wall? And I would write something and I would give it to Marwan, and he would go and he would say, no, you ruined it. It's not like this at all. And that is not literary writing. You got the facts wrong. Bam, bam, bam. And then I would go with what he wrote and I would say, Marwan, you're seriously overestimating the educational level about the Middle East that's happening in America right now. We got to explain this, or else no American will understand what you're saying. And we went back and forth and back and forth. I think some sentences we each rewrote about 10 times, to the point where I don't think there's one sentence in this book, nor one line that I drew, that isn't the product of both of us.
I want to share with you both a video comment from Christian Benedict. He's a campaigns manager for Amnesty International UK. Have a listen.
Thank you, Marwan, for telling us your story in such an eloquent and vivid manner, and to Molly for her rich and poignant illustrations. As you know, we at Amnesty International recently issued a report stating that the US-led coalition's war for annihilation in Raqqa killed hundreds of civilians, and the UK needs to come clean over its role in this carnage. A coalition commander wrote last year that there has never been a more precise air campaign in the history of armed conflict. And a few days ago, the UK Defence Secretary said our research was disgraceful, unfounded and damaging. If you had a message for the UK government regarding its attitude towards civilians in Raqqa, what would it be?
Marwan?
I would say stop lying, because it's an obvious lie. It doesn't need, so much research to see, to wonder. The city hosted, according to many reports, a number between 150,000 people and 200 just right at the beginning of the campaign that lasted for months. Where did those people go, and why almost 80% to 90% from the houses there were destroyed? Why, and how could this possibly be called a liberation? And then you say that you only killed a very small number.
21 people, they said they killed.
Yeah, and then they increased the number to something 57, I think, after reports came. And it became a joke. At least you owe the people the truth here.
Let me put this to both of you. This is from Lena on Twitter. And she talks about how many people being displaced from their homes in southern Syria, and they're now trapped between Assad's airstrikes and Jordan's close border. Why can't anyone get these people food, water, medicine, shelter? UN, UNHCR, anyone? Hashtag Dara.
The reason is quite clear, which is that Israel and Jordan won't let people get them water. It's not rocket science. All of these problems with refugees come from two things, which is first that there are bombings and there are military campaigns that are displacing people from their homes. But second, that the governments of the neighboring states aren't allowing people in. They're not allowing people to safety. In Turkey, they're shooting people at the border. In Lebanon, people have froze trying to sneak over the border in the winter. In Jordan, they closed the border, and you have, I think hundreds of thousands of people in the desert. You have kids being killed by scorpions there. Israel, obviously, the border also they have closed, and they're not taking refugees. Because these states haven't opened their border, they're creating an additional humanitarian crisis to the humanitarian crisis the Assad regime has created by bombing.
Let me share these two comments with you, Marwan. They're from YouTube, live right now. I don't think the Syrian civil war was motivated by resources. It began as a protest of Assad's government during the Arab Spring. Another comment, live from YouTube, from Yolanda. There's a difference between cracking down on protesters and destroying a country. Common sense should tell you that Assad is not responsible for destroying his own country. Outside forces are to blame. That could get us into an hour's worth of conversation. But what I do want to end with, just briefly, Marwan, is what do you want people to get out of your memoir and Molly's memoir? What do you want them to, what's the takeaway in a sentence, if you can?
If there are any lessons to drive from here, people should rely on themselves. Mm-hmm. People should unite among themselves and have conversations, because a divided community cannot reach any outcome except a tragic one.
Sure.
And people's lives really matter. No matter how, what opinions they hold.
Thank you, Marwan. Thank you, Molly. I'm just going to share this with you, Marwan. Again, it's coming live on Twitter. I'm really impressed and motivated by Marwan. Well done, buddy. Keep that spirit. Just to remind you what we're talking about. Molly and Marwan's book, Brothers of the Gun, available right now. Thanks for watching, everybody. You'll catch us at AJ Stream on Twitter and always online at aljazeera.com/the stream. See you next time.